here. What we're going to do in this episode is plank this structure, and that means basically laying across chipboard strips. This is chipboard, very thin cardboard. If you don't have access to this, check the description below. I'll give you a link where you can buy this in big, thick quantities, or you can use, like, I don't know, cereal box material or just any thin cardboard. But this is called chipboard, and you're going to need a very thin type of board like this for this process. Now we have an empty structure here, and this is a tower that looks very similar. It's going to look very similar to this one. All right, not exactly. They have different functions. This one has 2 levels, 1, 2, and there'll be a top area up here where the goblin archers are firing down. There's a window, but the bottom area will be plank. There will be no doors, no openings. So it will be a little different than this one, but we're going on this kind of idea for the look and feel of it. See all the wood planks, how they look weathered? All right, to get this started, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the bottom. Now right here I have about 1.5 inches, maybe 2 inches, 2 inches of height here from the bottom to the top, right? What I'm going to do is I'm not going to be using a ruler at all. I'm going to be using my eyeball. And the reason being is I want this to look natural, not perfect. Now I have a flat edge here. That looks too good. So before I do any kind of planking or cutting of the wood, I take care of edges like this. And I'm not going to explain this in every time I do this. I'm just going to tell you this one time so that you'll know how to do it. What I do is I take my scissors and I move I randomly move my wrist as I cut. And I'm just applying, and I'm also wiggling the chipboard, as you can see. And I just cut a very thin sliver off of the edge, and it just gives it an unnatural or a natural look, not an unnatural or a false look. And then I'm going to do the other edge, but I'm going to do it based on the height here. Now, what you need to decide is, do you want to run the planks vertically or horizontally? Well, on this first level, I'm going to run them vertically, this way. So all I need to do is I'm just going to put my chipboard here, and I'm just going to sort of make a mark. That's about, right there is about the width or the height that I'm going for. And once again, I'm going to wiggle my scissors, and I'm just going all the way across because I'm sure I'll use these at some point. All right, set this aside, and now you have one bit of chipboard that is uneven on one side. It's also uneven over here, so I need to go ahead and do the same on all 4 sides. Now you may find you occasionally cut a little too thin. You made a mistake and it won't span the area. Just set it aside because you will eventually use it. All right, there we go. All right, so all 4 sides of this little strip are now uneven. All right, so what I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to, sorry, blocking the camera here. I am going to use my 1, 2, 3 blocks just so I can tilt this at an angle so I can kind of see. All right, I wanted to start, it doesn't really matter where you start. Let's start right there. And I can automatically tell I've cut it a little too big. That's okay. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to place the chipboard from left to right, and I'm going to make another guess cut at how much I need. This piece right here should cover that, also leaving little gaps between the wood. Now again, it's a little too tall, so I'm just eyeballing it. I need to trim it just a little bit. All right, I cut just a bit off. And until you start putting the planks down, you really won't know if you've got it right. Now you'll notice I left a gap at the bottom. See, that post is sitting about, I don't know, 5 centimeters above the 5 millimeters above the base. That's done on purpose. That's going to give me a little wiggle room to take this piece, put glue on the top, glue on the bottom, and then make sure that the top edge of the plank does not go too high up here and interfere with the second level. Does that make sense? It will once I start laying the plank. All right, so let's do this. I'm going to go ahead and cut 1 plank. Now, when you cut chipboard very thin, it tends to curl. Can you see the curl? So you gotta You got to sort of bend it back in shape. It's chipboard. It's real easy. It'll flatten. And what I typically do is I go ahead and I cut a bunch of these to the same, roughly the same width. You want variation. Don't go too crazy. Don't make really super thin ones and then super thick ones, because it will look weird when you get them put down. You want your planks to be typically close, within a millimeter or two of the same thickness of each, but you do want variability. Then what I do is I just take a few seconds and straighten them all out. Do it now. Do the straightening part before you start gluing, because that glue is going to start cooling, and it depends on where you are and your weather and the heat of the glue and things like that. But go ahead and get all the planks flattened and ready for glue. And there's a reason I do this, not just to have them ready to go, but also I like to do 2 or 3 planks at a time. So what you don't want to do is put a line of glue and a line of glue, and then have to fix one, then have to fix one. Get them ready. Even go so far, I don't do this, but you could even go so far as to line them up in front of you like that. And then what I do is I do about 3 planks worth of hot glue on the top and the bottom. So let me show you. Oh, you know what I didn't do? I didn't trim these edges too well. Let me do that real quick. I don't know how I missed that one. Look away. And then on this side, look away. All right. If you find that your edges are too long, you can trim them anytime. I just wanted to do it now because it just didn't look right. All right, time for some glue. So you can start on the right to left, or you can go left to right or right to left. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to go left to right, and I'm just putting down a run of glue. Now the glue is not going to cool instantly, but it's going to give me enough time to place these planks in a way that there are nice gaps between them. All right, can you see the gaps? And you don't want to put the planks, squish them. Don't squish them. Let that natural spacing happen. Just eyeball it, put it down, and let the planks fall where they may. And don't worry about perfection. That's the one thing it took me a few times to get used to. When I first started doing these goblin things, sometimes I would make them too tight. This one doesn't look too bad, but look at the roof. I hardly left any gaps in that roof. Do you see that? There needs to be some rain trickling down on the heads of the goblins in there. It looks too good. So we're gonna stick with that imperfect nature. Now here I've got a window post, so I'm just gonna jump over it. I'm not gonna cover it, and I'm just gonna put down a couple, enough for 2 pieces. And I'm gonna look for my thinnest pieces. That one and this one look pretty thin. And if a piece glues sort of out because it's resting on something, it's okay. It's going to add to the overall look. See that? I went between these 2 posts, but this one right here is just sitting on top of that. It's no big deal. Then I'm going to go ahead and finish enough for 3 more. Now don't worry about the edges. Let me show you this in a second. I'm going to put down 3 more. All right, I've got room for 1 more there. And I've got a thinner cut piece here that I think I can squeeze down in there. Yeah, there we go. All right. Now, I've got all the planking on one side, and you'll notice that it doesn't go all the way to this piece and this piece. I don't want that there. I want these pieces sticking out because it's going to look like the timber that's used to make the frame. All of this is going to be primed later black, and then by the time you paint it, it's going to look like weathered wood that's been out in the sun or in the near salt water, however you want to weather your wood. But you don't want to cover all of the things that make the internal structure. You want a little bit of that left visible. All right, now you'll notice I have 3 pieces left. That makes sense because there's gaps in here. If I took all of these and squeezed them so there was no gap, I could probably fit 2 more of those in there. Maybe 3, I don't know. But the idea is that you want those gaps, so you're going to have pieces left over. Don't throw them away because you're going to flip it over and we can just keep going. Now at this point, I'll go ahead and glue these. I'll go ahead and glue these down because I might as well so I don't lose them. And Also, this is going to show you another thing I love about Goblin structures. When you sort of use other pieces from other sides, they don't necessarily match. All right, this is kind of hard to tell, but there's a bigger gap here than there is here. And that's going to be visible to the human eye, and it's going to have that look of imperfection, and roll with it. All right, so now I'm working on this side. Once again, I'm just going to try and cut. I only need this much. And remember, wiggle your scissors so you get that uneven edge. And these are going to be a little tall, so I'm going to trim them down just a little bit. A little bit more. There we go. All right. And then once again, as you're cutting those timbers, cut them to roughly the same width, but not the exact. Don't use a ruler and a sharp edge, a sharp blade. Just cut them with scissors. Wiggle it a little bit with your hand to give it that uneven look. And when you're done, sometimes you'll end up with a really wide piece. Go ahead and cut it into 2 thin pieces. Put your fingers on both sides so it doesn't twist as you cut it. And you kind of maybe set those aside, because sometimes these really thin pieces come in handy for filling, like I just did a minute ago, those gaps on the side that they're not quite wide enough for a normal piece, but you could fit a skinny piece in there. Then, once again, go ahead and flatten all your pieces of chipboard that have curled as you cut them, and line them up and get them ready to put down. Now, I'm going to leave these thin ones over here in case I need them. They're sitting over here to the side. And now I'm just going to go ahead and don't run too much glue. You don't want to do 5, 6 planks at a time. Just set a pace. Figure out what your hot glue gun is doing in terms of cooling temperature, how fast it's cooling, and you'll have to this will be different for every glue gun, unfortunately. Just lay them down and then do another run. If you want, do them one at a time, but I can tell you that the hot glue, no matter the gun, it's not going to glue so fast that you could not put 1 or 2 down, maybe probably even 3 at a time. All right. And you can go crazy with the glue. The glue is usually going to be hidden behind the planks, so it's not going to matter. Now, here's something I want to talk to you about. There are 2 really large gaps in there. You see them? You can choose to leave those gaps as it is, all right? And they will, remember, it's going to be painted black, so it's going to be dark in here. You're not really going to see through this, through the other side, and unless you had a bright light on the other side, maybe you'll see some lighting. But if you want to fix this, this is how I do it. I just take one of my leftover planks, and I cut it in half to make 2 pieces. And then you do what a good old goblin will do when they have a hole that the general says, I can see out that hole. Well, you just add a plank to cross it and block that hole up. And you can make it as crazy as you like. I sometimes put the glue on the actual unit, or I put it on the piece that I'm going to place so that I can move my hand and figure out what I want to do. With this one, I want to just go like that. There we go. So again, not the greatest. You could put a plank behind it if you really want to obstruct that. So let me show you how that works. I don't do this very often. I've done it a couple times because, again, I know that when the paint is applied, the black basing, it's going to block a lot of this. So you're not going to see through it too easy. So all I'm doing here is I'm just gluing a plank across the side. Can you see the plank? You can kind of see it behind there. All right. It doesn't really get as good of an effect as you're probably going to want. You would have to put a lot of them to cover all of those. But just trust me, you don't have to do this. Once it's all painted black, these large gaps, they're going to look just fine. Can you see here? Look at this gap. See that? You really can't see through it. I mean, you could if you angle it just right. But remember, this is going on a table. And players aren't going to be, unless if you're my player, the players I have don't care. They're not going to be looking for, can I see through that to the other side? It just serves a purpose. The gap actually sometimes looks actually authentic. All right, so we've got 2 sides down. Let's keep going. What I'm probably going to do here is I'm going to time lapse from this point forward until I get to the 4th wall here. and then I'll come back to normal time for the second level. So let's start time-lapsing now. All right, the first level is done, and I want to show you. See how you have gaps here that show the poles? All right, two ways to do that. One, you can actually glue in a shorter piece. I'm just going to waste this piece. You can glue a shorter piece over the edge, to block it. Or you can leave it exposed. It's totally up to you, whatever your aesthetic is, of goblin terrain is going for. If you like the idea of the structures being visible like that, for me, I tend to cover them. I've done it with all my other goblin structures, so I think I would, I'm going to be consistent here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim this down just a little bit and trim it. You want these to be thin, all right, not big. So I'm going to trim this a little thin. And what you want to do is you want it to look uneven. So I'm going to cut it. I'm going to cut pieces at an angle to look like it was sort of a piece of wasteboard that they just decided at the last minute to put in there. And then what you want to do is glue up this piece individually. Run a bead of glue down it. Watch your fingers. I've gotten pretty good about putting a very thin bead of glue down on it. And then just drop it down in there as best you can and let that glue dry. And you'll have an edge that's blocked up that should look natural, okay? You can go so far as to cut it very thin if you really want to. Well, now it's moving. There we go. You could cut it very thin so that it just looks like a waste piece. So I'm going to go ahead and do this to all four sides. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what you'd have to do the second level. Is pretty much identical to the first level, except now we have windows to deal with. And the windows, you just have to get a little creative in how you want them to look. All right, drop down in there, attach. There we go. That's more what I was going for. See how it covers the, it's still got gaps, but it covers the structure piece in there. So let me cut a couple more here. All right. Again, you could put the glue on the board. I just do it here so I have a little more control over the placement of it. There we go. Use your fingernail to just push it down in the gap there to seal it. And I've got one more to do. Fortunately, I've got one more piece of waste here that I can glue down in there. It's a little too thick, so I'm going to have to cut this one a little thinner. Cutting chipboard thin is kind of tricky because remember it curls as you cut it. So you just got to keep that in mind. And also it makes it harder to apply a little drop of glue down. So just go slow. You've still got 20 seconds before it cools. It's not going to cool that fast. Just get it down in there and attach it as best you can. There we go. Blocked it. All right, so now we have all four corners done. Now, same exact process. You have a piece. I'm just going to use this because it was left over. You're going to try and go from this top to overlapping the planks below them. It's going to be that stacking look that sort of makes it look authentic, at least in my opinion. But for the windows, work around them for right now. Let me show you what I'm going to do. So I'm going to take this piece and I'm going to cut a bunch of planks. And I am going to glue to the left and the right of the window. And I'm not worrying about the I'm not worrying about the length. They don't have to be exact. The strips that I'm cutting here, the planks, they don't have to be all the same length. As a matter of fact, again, it comes down to if there's some randomness to it, it will make it look better. If you ever want to make a perfect fort, you're going to have to use knife and make sure everything's cut perfectly. But this is what I love about the goblins. They just don't care. Now, one other thing I should mention about doing the top. On this one, you can put the glue on the top beam up here, but don't run a blob of glue on the actual chipboard. The reason being is you may go a little low, and if you place it, you're going to have glue visible, and if you pull it back, it's gonna leave the strings are gonna get on stuff. So what I do on these is I put a drop of glue at the top of the piece of the plank, at the bottom, and I let the glue fall where it wants. So I just, as long as it touches the top up here, the glue on the bottom will attach. See, if I had put glue right there, it would be visible. And there's still a little bit. You can take your finger and scratch it away. Now, when you paint this, don't worry about the hot glue. It'll all blend and it'll be fine. So this is where you're going to be doing these pretty much one at a time, not gluing a run. You could just run a bit of glue over there, but I prefer to take my time and do this so that I have the minimum amount of hot glue squirting out on the planks below, okay? So again, put a little bead on top, a little bead on bottom, and just place it where you want. And I do try not to make the planks go above this top board, because remember, we're going to be gluing planks horizontally, and you want to leave it exposed, at least on the top, so it'll have something to attach to. So attach these planks just like a hair's width below the very top of that piece. If one or two goes over, it's not a big deal, but you do want to be careful and make sure that you line them up as consistently as you can. Now, I can already hear somebody saying, yeah, but now it looks perfect. We're going to mess that up later. All right, so at this point, I've got a pretty big gap in there, but I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to keep going on the left and right sides of the windows. All right, these are actually, there's a slope here, so these may not be able to reach. Well, they do, barely. All right, so I'm going to have to go real low on the glue, low and high on the piece to make it attach to both pieces. There we go. And remember, make sure there are gaps. Don't squish these pieces tight against one another. Leave the gap. And once you place it, try not to mess with it until that glue hardens really well. I've accidentally bumped them before or shifted one because I didn't like the look of it, and it'll leave a glue smear, so don't risk that. All right, so there you go. So we now have 4 and 4 with gaps on the window. I'm not worried about the gap just yet. I'm going to show you how I'll fix that. But let's frame the window now. So again, what we're going to be doing here to frame the window is going horizontally, all right? You can make these as long or as short as you want. I don't tend to make them as long as these pieces. I cut them just a little bit shorter, but I also cut them a little bit longer than the width of the window. So let me place this one and I'll show you what I mean. And again, this is where you want to put the glue on the chipboard and not on here. All right, there's one done. Now this is where you can really have some fun with like changing the width of the pieces, because it will look, nothing will match up, and that's good. That's what you're going for. And also remember, when I put angles on the window frame, you're going to have boards that are at an angle, and that actually lends itself well. And I'll show you why. Because at some point you're going to cross the line where the two levels meet, and another piece is going to cross over down into that, and it's going to look like it was just sort of hammered in place at last minute. And this, hot glue. This next one is the one that this is the one that's going to do it. Let me show you. All right, so a little bead of glue there, a little bead of glue there. and then down. See how it's crossing over into the boards below? That's going to make it look, at least in my mind, very, very interesting. And then these little pieces that you cut off, don't get rid of them because they make for good things like what I'm going to do here. Let me show you. See that? The goblins have framed a window. They don't know how to frame a window, neither do I. But they did their best, and it doesn't look great, but it looks very goblin-y. All right, so let's keep going. I need to get this top covered up here, so I'm just randomly cutting these to length. All right, one more. Probably need one more. Definitely need one more. I'm going to use this shorter one here. Why not? Make it go right there. All right. See that? Now we still have a pretty large gap here. Again, you can leave it. It's not going to be super, super visible. Or use some of your scrap pieces and do this. Come in from behind, not in front. You don't want to do too much on the front. I actually may have gone a little too far on this one. I'll have to be careful about that. Come from behind and just glue it in place to block that gap. And then do it again on the other side if you're not happy with the gap around the window. And should look fine. Let me put this one in place and we'll take a look at what we have. All right, put that down. There we go. I have a framed window. Not really enjoying this part right here, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to fix it by putting a big old cross across it. Anytime you want to make something look like the goblins just threw something together, just make a crisscross like this, like that. That looks patched up. Looks like maybe, a fireball went through here or something tore a hole and they just used a bunch of wood to patch it up. That's the look you're going for. I could probably do one up here, but too much. The secret is knowing when to stop. So I'm going to stop on this side. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to time lapse the other three sides, do them exact the same. One side doesn't even have a window, so I can just go straight on down. But I'm going to go ahead, starting right now, I'm going to start time lapsing. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and plank the top floor here, and that will allow me to start working on the outer part. I'm still pondering on that, but I got a little time, so let's go ahead and plank it. What I'm going to do here is just sort of hold this up there. I'm measuring from this piece right here all the way over to this, and then cutting just a little extra for overhang. And again, just sort of eyeballing it, and wiggle your hands so you get that rough edge. And then what I'm going to do is cut this in half, actually a little less than half. I'm going to cut it right about there, because remember, I don't want to cover this gap up, not yet. So I'm basically going to be gluing from here to here, the outside of this gap to here, and these look like they'll do. So I'll just cut, probably not even half of this. Now for the top, I tend to cut, I don't know why, because I think it's more aesthetic. I tend to cut these a little thinner, these planks a little less than the ones that hang on the side. The ones on the side are wider, and for some reason, to me it looks cleaner for a goblin, so to speak. All right, so just start putting a bead down, and you can go over this overhang a little bit. It doesn't matter if it goes over it or if it's like lined up perfectly. because we're going to cover that up a little different. Remember, I'm leaving that gap because I want to create a space for a ladder so that the goblins will be able to access the top. Otherwise, it doesn't look right. It's like, how do they get up there? All right, for these, I'll go over just a little bit. It's okay. Now, I want that gap to be clean, so I'm not going to have an overhang over here. I'm not overhanging, so I'm going to put this down sort of flush with the edge, and I'll show this to you up close in just a second so you'll understand what I'm talking about. And that glue is very hot. It just got on my finger. Wow. I am very messy when it comes to hot glue. I will stick my fingers in a piling hot of it, a hot ball of it. But all right, so see how it's a little flush there? It's a little overhang here. You know, try to keep it flush here because that's going to be the hole for the ladder. And then I can just go back to the normal run here. If it goes over a little bit, it's not a big deal. And I'm going to be surrounding this with a guard, so it doesn't matter if it's wow, that's hot. It doesn't matter if it's pretty or not. Just do your best. I'm going to leave that in there. Give you guys a laugh. Wow, I'm going to have a little blister on that one. It's like I rested my finger on it for just a second longer than I should have. Wow. All right, so there is half of the floor. And as you can see, I've left the gap flush there, and then it's sort of not flush over here. Go around and do the other side. Don't worry about this gap. It's going to be blocked by a wall, sort of a fence that we put around. There you go. All right. Now we need to seal. Now we need to cover these. And again, for this, you just cut smaller pieces. You're just spanning the gap there. You can use crisscrosses, whatever you want to do to make it look the way you like it. I tend to just go straight across. I don't put glue on here. I actually put it on the piece. I just put it on one end and then on the other end, and I just stick it down to cover it. And go a little random with this. You know, make it look messy until you get near the the hole for the ladder. Then you want to kind of be careful. Don't cover it up. I've got spots for 2 more planks on this side. You know, leave a hole. You know, it's always possible the goblin might put his foot through the wrong gap and take a tumble. Give your players, you know, a chance to have a laugh at the goblin's expense. All right, that's 3 and 4. That ought to do it. All right. Now, if you want, I'm not going to build the ladder in this video series. You know, building a ladder, just take 2 toothpicks, cut some chipboard for thin planks, and just glue it down in there so it's sort of sticking up. I might do it. We'll see. We'll see how time goes. All right, there we go. Floorboard is done. So there is one tower. And now what I'm going to do is the fence line that goes all the way around that will keep the goblins from falling off the roof. Now to do this sort of wall to go around, I'm sort of making this up as I go because I really, until I see it in place, I don't know if I'm going to like it. But the goblins are kind of short, okay? So when they're placed on here, when they're placed on here, you don't want to have a fence that's too high. They need to be able to see over, right? So it's looking like this fence is going to be almost the width of a single plank. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut 2 very thin runs, and I'll show you what these look like. And I'm going to do 2 because one thick run, which will be a thick plank, I think will look odd. I think 2, see how it curls? You know, this is how thin I'm talking about. Just thin where if you put 2 together and put them in front of a goblin, the goblin would still be able to see over. Using these, what I'm going to do is I want to put, you know, the wall from here to here. but it's a little bit long for a plank. So I'm going to go back to my dowels, or the little toothpick type things. I'm going to use these to reinforce the fence. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut one of these in half, and I don't want it sticking up too high. I just want it sticking up the height of the fence. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick it down in here, and it's going to go about that high up where my thumb is. So I'm going to put a little bit of glue in the middle there, just like that. I'm going to stick it down in there and stick it to the side, hold it in place just to secure it for a few seconds. There you go. That's going to be where my planks are glued to. So now what I can do is I can take and cut one of these, and then I'll cut it in half again. So I'm going to cut, these will be the bottom, then I'll do two more on top. So let's go ahead and do that. Actually I'm gluing to the fence post, so I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, and that one will go across like that. This one I have to put a drop of glue on top of this one so they overlap, and it will go like so. Alright, and we'll cut two more. Do it again. Alright, that one will go like that, and then this one across like that. What am I going to do with that piece right there? Alright, there's my top wall, and if the goblin's sitting on it, you know what? It's still too short, isn't it? Still too short. Let's go one more up. Okay. Alright. Let's see what this looks like. There we go. That's more like it. That's about half coverage on the goblin. Now I just need to do that all the way around. Now here, you'll notice I don't have a place to glue this down into, so I'm just going to have to glue it to the actual chipboard, and this is going to be cut in half. I'll just have to put a little dab of glue on the bottom here and hold it in place until it dries well, dries vertical. So sometimes you have to just change your plans. Don't let it stress you out. You're making goblin terrain, so it's supposed to look thrown together. So again, here I have a gap, so I can glue one down in it, but over here, no gap. So you'll have to, depending on how your tower turns out, you can either glue it on top directly like I'm doing here with just a dab of glue, or you can glue one and stick it down in there so it's a little stronger. This will obviously be a little stronger since I'm gluing it to a post and not a piece of chipboard, but I'm usually pretty careful with my terrain, so hopefully this will hold up. And also, since I'm gluing planks across it, that will provide strength to that piece as well. The planks are less likely to, if that pops off, it's still going to be glued in place by the planks that are glued across it. So there we go. All right, so my posts are in place, and now I just need to cut more of the, we'll cut this to size. There we go. Just need to cut more runs of the fence line. Not sure what you'd call that. I'm sure there's a technical term for that runs around a watchtower or whatever, but I don't know it off the top of my head. All right, straighten them out, and then cut them in half and glue them down. And you'll notice, you probably already noticed because I've mentioned it many times, I'm not doing any not doing any measuring really. All of this is done by eyeball. I mean, I'm just eyeballing things, and occasionally I'll make a mistake. I'll cut something too short, but chipboard is pretty inexpensive, so you just sort of roll with it. And if you end up cutting something too short, just cut it a little longer next time. All right, that may be a little too tall, so I'm going to scooch it down just a hair. All right. Put these in place. You'll notice I'm doing 3 at a time. You can do that. Some things you will want to do 1 at a time. Some things you'll learn. You just figure out that, hey, you can do a run of 3 or 4 planks at a time. Save yourself a little bit of strain. All right, now here what I'm going to do is there's going to be a bigger overlap because I can only take this up to the edge there. All right, it's not going all the way. So these are not going to line up exactly. See how it's a little uneven? But again, it doesn't matter. Just run a bead across and a bead across and stick them in place. There you go. One more for the back here, and this one is done. Okay. All right. All right, once again, I can't really glue over these that are protruding, so I'll just put a brunt of glue there, and that's where I will start placing the planks. They'll be sort of lined up perfectly there, but it's okay. And then run a bead of glue across, and finish it up. There we go. Now I have a wall that goes all the way around, protects the little goblins to a point. They can look over the edge and fire. You see that? All right. Now, just got to do 2 more of those. I hope you'll forgive me for a very short advertisement here. For the last year, I've been publishing Bexim's Bazaar gaming magazine. Each month, a new issue has been released with articles and adventures and other resources. The magazine has been evolving and improving, and I've been very fortunate to have a lot of contributors submitting their content. If you'd like to grab a free issue, check out the description in the video below for a link. And if you'd like to subscribe, there is also information on that as well.